Welcome to another episode of Habits for Health. Today, we're going to discuss coffee, some of the benefits, why you might want to drink it if you're not already doing it, how much you might want to drink during a day, how often, and even some different tips on things you can do to make it healthier or unhealthier for you if you prefer that.
All right. Thanks for introducing our topic, Andreas. My name is Wouter, and I will first start with some of the downsides of coffee. So, if you're a very anxious person, then taking coffee or caffeine will increase this anxiety. So, if you're an anxious person, be mindful of that and be careful with that. Also, genetics may determine the breakdown of caffeine. So it might just be that the half-life of caffeine is much longer for you than it is for the average person. The average half-life of caffeine tends to be around 8 hours, which means that after consuming caffeine, like half of that will still be active in your bloodstream after about 7 hours. Another downside of caffeine or coffee is that it reduces the collagen synthesis. So if you're consuming caffeine on a regular basis, you might want to increase your collagen intake. These are all the downsides that I wanted to share with you. Is there anything you would like to add to that?
I never heard about that with collagen before. Do you know why that might be the case?
I guess because coffee, in essence, is a stressful thing for your body. Short-term stress is not necessarily bad, but it does change some of the processes going on inside your body.
You think
So
that, mm, sorry,
I
go
think
ahead.
that might have to do with it.
So you think it's because of that and not because of maybe the fact that it can be dehydrating?
Yeah, or perhaps both.
Hmm.
One doesn't exclude the other in this case.
So the thing with coffee, the way it increases stress is through cortisol spikes.
Hmm.
So, so I wonder if the the thing is then concerning an excessive spike in cortisol leading to decreased collagen synthesis. So, say you are naturally, or you have at this given moment where you're about to drink a cup of coffee, you might have a low production of cortisol. Then you might not get about the threshold of it being too much stress for your body, and then it might not happen. But if you're already at a high level of cortisol, then maybe it's going to be bad, and then it could have that effect. I could imagine.
Yeah, of course, the amount of caffeine that you're taking matters. And like I said, your own genetics matter. Um, and yeah, if you're already anxious, then it's very likely that this already has a bad effect on your skin and collagen production. So taking caffeine would only increase those negative effects.
But that's also the thing with cortisol, that the production changes throughout the day. Um,
Hmm.
Even a lot depending on your lifestyle too. Like for instance, doing fasting, it increases a lot. If you're
Yeah.
fasting and you just woke up, your cortisol is extremely high. And then taking it there, you
Hmm.
just like get it to a really bad level for you actually. So that's also
Yeah.
probably the reason why it's good to wait a bit for your natural production of cortisol to decrease a bit to actually get your caffeine intake or coffee.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So now we're getting into how to use coffee, and I agree that you should wait a bit until your natural cortisol levels are not as high as they are when you just wake up, because this is a function of just being a hunter-gatherer. Your body is waking you up to go in a search for food, and once you found it, then those sugars or whatever you've obtained will bring down your cortisol levels. So ideally, I'd say have your breakfast and then you just wait a bit until having your coffee, like maybe 90 minutes after waking or so.
hmm. So you would actually say have your breakfast and then have your coffee, and not coffee and then breakfast.
I say so, yeah.
Do you normally do that?
That's what I normally do. since I stopped doing intermittent fasting, yes, that's what I do.
Interesting. That's very
Also,
uncommon for most.
also, if I take my coffee before having breakfast, it kind of reduces my appetite. And especially now that I've lost so much weight by accident, by external factors, I want to make sure that I have an appetite and I eat as much as I can in the morning.
Hmm. This is interesting because so food, it also increases cortisol. So I wonder the comparison between, say, caffeine versus food in terms of cortisol increase spike. All that. I don't know what the difference is there, how different they are. Maybe coffee is providing you with the bigger spike. If you're eating a really large meal, maybe that large meal will provide you with a bigger spike than the coffee. So that could again be.
Yeah, yeah. I don't I think the cortisol spike from caffeine and coffee is definitely a lot higher than from food. And also I find that food can actually have more of a relaxing effect at times, depending on what you're eating, of course. If you're not like taking super spicy meals for breakfast or very breakfast is very heavy in fat. I found that if I take some sugars, like naturally occurring sugars like oatmeal or bananas or any other type of fruit, that I don't think my cortisol levels rise nearly as fast as when I'm taking caffeine.
Interesting. So one thing you can also kind of like check that is just feeling your heartbeat actually. If it's
Hmm.
a lot after the coffee, you're probably
Hmm.
in excessively stressed states. The cortisol is increasing too much. And the same with the meal, it can do the same thing.
Yeah.
And again, like in terms of how much the meal is gonna cause in terms of the cortisol spike, there's gonna be a lot of factors at play there. So of course, how recently you last ate, the size of the meal, the type of um, food you're eating, um, and even the time of the day as well.
Yeah.
So
Personally, I do find that my heart rate, it of course it rises when I eat food, but
hmm,
not nearly as much as when I have a cup of coffee.
interesting. What about if
And
you no, go ahead.
And also, I wanted to mention that there's like a natural wave of cortisol, and I try to have my coffee when this cortisol is naturally going down. So you can extend and ride this wave.
Hmm, that's a good idea. The only problem with that is that it's going to be individualized. So, like, there's some graphs and stuff on like cortisol production during the day, but your time of waking and going to sleep, that can change that a lot. And even just like your how much stress you're experiencing throughout the day can change that a lot too. So like
Yeah,
these graphs people showing like natural cortisol production, I don't really believe in those because it can be very different from each person. So I think it's more to kind of like try to figure out your stress level and then try to personalize it from that.
yeah, yeah. How do you rate stress? I would usually observe my heart rate, and that kind of gives me an idea of how stressed out I am.
Mm. I think that's a good idea. Um yeah, if you're feeling anxious, um feeling bad, feeling overwhelmed or something, I guess that could also be signs of
Yeah,
excessive stress. Yeah, heart rate is a good indicator. Again,
uh,
even just like feeling your heartbeat, feeling your the rhythm there can also be helpful to kind of try to figure out
yeah,
how stressed
yeah,
you are. If it's not going up, like if it's seems pretty regular, then
yeah.
it should be fine. But if it's already high and you're like doing something to increase that even further, that could be pretty bad for you.
Yeah, it would be very cool to have a real-time cortisol measuring machine
Yeah.
like they have for diabetes clients to measure their insulin. That would be so cool. Very, very learnful.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder I wonder how closely heart rate and cortisol are correlated because if they're very closely correlated, then even just having your real time heart rate could be enough to actually figure that out.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. Some other things I wanted to add in terms of caffeine consumption. Yeah, the half-life is quite long. So I would avoid taking caffeine in the afternoon or the evening. And in general, I would say do not try and take more than 200 milligrams of caffeine per day, which is 2 cups of coffee or 3 espressos. Personally, I am sticking to just 1 cup of coffee. If I take two, then that might even keep me awake, even if I have those just in the morning.
Hmm. Have you ever got your genes tested in terms of your caffeine sensitivity?
Yeah, I'm currently waiting on my outcome.
Okay, yeah, because
Yeah.
that changes things a lot in terms of how many you would ideally or how much caffeine you would ideally consume. I know that I have a pretty high tolerance, so for me,
Yeah.
it's not going to be really damaging for me to consume a lot of caffeine during the day.
Yeah.
And um, even so, how your adenosine receptors are at this current stage can also change a lot in terms of their sensitivity of
Hmm.
the need of
Yeah.
caffeine. So that's also why I do a reset, like where I take a break of caffeine regularly, like 7 to 10 days or so, because then I reset my adenosine receptors and then I'm able to
Hmm.
get the benefit with a much smaller dosage. And I
Yeah.
think it's a really good thing to do as well, for the
Yeah.
body. So because
Yeah.
then you don't need to constantly raise your amount to kind of get the same benefit.
Yeah. I've kind of found that even just reducing my intake also made me more sensitive to caffeine again.
Mm.
And I'm talking about the positive effects of caffeine because I was at some point taking 3 espressos a day, and that was actually interfering with my sleep. And I do suspect that I'm quite sensitive to caffeine, like I am sensitive to all things in life. Um,
Nice.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that could be the case. And have you noticed difference between the quantity of caffeine combined?
Uh, y- yeah, yeah. I do feel like if I take less for a few days, that improves my sleep. I do feel like that. Yeah. And definitely, like when I'm taking too much in one day, that'll screw over my sleep. Yeah, if that's what you're asking.
Okay, I was thinking more in terms of say if you're drinking like two espressos close to each other or too
Hmm.
far apart. Like, do you notice differences between like the timing in terms of the dosage? Um, if you're taking a lot together or if you're taking them more separately throughout the day, basically.
Well, I do feel like if I take more caffeine at once, and then I do an activity that kind of reduces my cortisol level. So if I take an ice bath or if I go to the gym, then that'll reduce the effects of cortisol on me. I feel like that. And if I would take this 1 cup before going to the gym or having an ice bath, and then after I take another, then that is probably more likely to raise my cortisol levels more throughout the rest of the day.
Hmm. Okay. Because the thing is, exercise can also increase cortisol as well as cold, but the like long-term effects from it can reduce it to make it then naturally lower. And I guess also if you're using the caffeine for fuel, might also excrete it quicker. So say for exercise,
Hmm.
it excrete it quicker
Yeah,
because your body
yeah,
is using the fuel like of the caffeine, is using it to like um be very active. That could be a factor there. And then
yeah, precisely.
like when you're actually in the ice bath or taking a cold shower, your cortisol is rising a lot. But after, when the body like adapts to it and like accepts the pain and all that, it reduces and you feel better. Immunity feels increases, your health is better, all that. So in the moment
Hmm.
you're probably not really gonna experience that, but then after the lasting effects, the hours after, you're
Yeah,
probably gonna feel something from that.
yeah, yeah. And I think this is a nice bridge to the positive effects of caffeine. We're talking about exercise and ice baths. And actually taking coffee before doing these activities can enhance the positive effects of these things. For example, coffee contains a lot of polyphenols that are good for heart health. And if you combine taking these polyphenols, which increase AMPK, then you're gonna do your exercise afterwards or take your ice bath afterwards. And those also increase AMPK. So you get a larger effect from combining coffee and exercise or an ice bath in this case, which I think is pretty useful. And then also, caffeine may create some alertness, which may motivate you to push yourself more in the gym. So, in essence, it has a positive effect on strength output. And if you're not exercising or whatever, and you want to use this for work, then it might motivate you to work harder, and this will improve your cognition while doing these tasks.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think that the biggest aspect is also just like increased focus, sustained focus on any task and energy levels.
Hmm.
So then, if you're feeling a lot more energetic, of course, you're gonna be able to perform better in the gym or out in a run
Yeah.
or doing a sport or whatever. The same with the work. If you're feeling energetic and feeling focused, you're gonna, of course, do better and sustain that for longer. So yeah, I think it's a really good benefit of it.
Yeah. And yeah, do keep in mind that you don't need to stay like on all the time, you know. So it's fine if you're a bit more tired and therefore performing less in the gym or whatever, or uh, being a little less fit to do your work. Because if you're very focused on that, or very focused on being on all the time, and you demand that you're focused all the time, then this may lead to more anxiety. And that anxiety in combination with coffee is just a bad idea.
Yeah, if you're naturally feeling more stressed, feeling more cortisol, and you combine that with caffeine, then of course it's gonna be bad for you. So it depends on your tolerance, the individuality in terms of that case, and the timing even of how that differs. I think
Hmm.
in terms of timing and dosages for me, I perform best when I try to divide it over the day of like kind of pretty equal dosages of coffee. So that could be like maybe like 3 or 4 espressos spread out through the day or something, and then it kind of is sustained
Hmm.
focus. And then you don't really get that crash. And again, like then also things to reduce that cortisol spike, like L-theanine, other things, I think is really
Hmm.
good things to focus on too, because that
Yeah.
can actually balance out the cortisol spike so you don't really experience it or to a much lower degree. And then
Yeah.
you can have that harmful effect for you. And especially if you're already having increased production of cortisol, you're already feeling stressed, and you really want some coffee that could kind of be a way for you to be able to still handle it without it giving you bad side effects from it.
Yeah. It's a very good idea to add some L-theanine when you feel jittery from caffeine to kind of offset that jittery effect.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to do it before you consume the caffeine. I normally consume matcha, and then after that I take my coffee. I think it's a good way to decrease that cortisol
Hmm.
spike, and also just matcha is really healthy as well. So you get like
Yeah.
the benefits of both, which is I think is a really good idea, and also the combination of different polyphenols, and that probably also is a good idea to combine.
Yeah, it's a good idea to use a combination of polyphenols together because they usually work synergistically.
Yeah.
Um, as you know, with Elixir Life, I have these synergistic polyphenols in one product. So if you don't like coffee and you want to use some polyphenols to activate AMPK, then taking Strong Heart by Elixir Life is a good idea.
Hmm.
Some self-promotion right here.
All good. I get it. But yeah, it's a good idea. And it shows the power of the how synergistic effects are compared to just taking one thing alone, where you would need a lot lower dosage of each compound when you combine them rather than taking only one, where you might need like 5, 10,
Yeah.
20 more to get the same or similar effects.
Yeah.
Besides the fact that combining them, you're also able to experience different effects too. So say one is great for heart health or for lowering your insulin or whatever the function is. If you have like 5, 10 different compounds with different things, able to basically increase your whole body health by taking them all together. So even that is
Yeah.
also a good idea.
Yeah, and some of them have a higher bioavailability than others. Some of them have longer half-life than others, and some of them may be able to cross the blood-brain barrier better than others. So it's a good idea to take a few of these polyphenols together.
Yeah. What else do you think people should do to decrease the cortisol spike from coffee?
Mm, and not add any sugar to coffee. Um, if you want to add anything to your coffee, then maybe go for a heavy cream or MCT oil or something like that. Using sugars together with caffeine is a bad idea, in my opinion.
Hmm. That's interesting because carbs can actually decrease cortisol. So if you actually, of course, if you're excessively consuming carbs, then of course not gonna do that thing. But if you actually use the fuel that your body needs from carbs, it can actually decrease the cortisol levels, which is why saying doing keto increase your cortisol a lot, and actually being fast the same. So if you actually are
Mhm,
taking, I don't know, some honey, for instance, in your coffee, you're actually gonna decrease your cortisol levels from that caffeine spike. So
mhm.
but then again, it
But
depends on your intake. So say
yeah,
you just ate a big meal with a lot of carbs and you also get like some more sugar or honey or whatever in your coffee, then it could be excessive. But if you're tying it to your activity levels and to your
mhm,
actual intake of carbs, that could be a really good idea. So for instance, um, in the morning when you haven't consumed any carbs and you add a bit of honey to the coffee can actually help
mhm.
to reduce cortisol.
Yeah, all right, I can see that happening. But the thing is that if you're like if you're the average person in our Western society, then I think this would just be bad for insulin levels. I think that's the main reason why I would suggest that people don't add honey or sugar to their coffee. Um, I think this is a big problem for most people in our society, and maybe not so much you and I, if you're like very lean and your insulin sensitivity is good. But yeah, it's more of a warning to people who are consuming sugars throughout the day and who are not matching that activity level.
Yeah, that's the thing. If people they're just like keep on consuming like tons of carbs and they add more to the coffee and don't actually spend any of it, of course, it's not gonna reduce cortisol levels. But if you actually don't have pretty much have anything stored in your body right now and you put it in there, it's gonna be helpful. So it depends on what you recently ate, how much. So
Yeah,
for me, I pretty much always when I'm home add some honey to my coffee because I know that I need it and I know it's gonna help me. So then it depends on yeah how much you ate, how many carbs you have stored in your body
yeah,
and muscles,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
there.
yeah. Definitely depends on how much you've stored and how much is in your system. Yeah,
Yeah, and again, how much you can handle too. Um,
yeah,
like depending on your muscle size and even your natural insulin function, how well it is. If you're really
yeah,
um, metabolically inflexible, able to probably not
yeah.
handle a big spike
Right.
at one given
So
time.
the more lean muscle mass you have, the more glycogen you can take up.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
All right. This was pretty much all that I wanted to share on the coffee. Anything you wanted to discuss any further?
Yeah, I just want to mention a little bit just about like individuality again in terms of say caffeine intake, some terms of like timing and how much and when. So yeah, for a lot of people, it's usually between 6 to 8 hours before sleep that you would ideally
Hmm.
stop consuming caffeine. For some, you have to go even further. You can barely even drink coffee in the morning at 8 a.m. and go to sleep at 10 or 12, and you still can experience problems from that if you're really really sensitive to coffee, but for some you're
Hmm.
able to handle a lot more. You could actually even drink um, a bit of coffee, not before sleep. Probably is not a good idea, but maybe like if you're
Yeah.
out before sleep and not have any big issues with it. So depending on your individuality, so it's a good idea to figure out the sensitivity to coffee, and then try to go from there and like track your sleep, track your genetics to figure out how sensitive you are, to be able to kind of really dial that in, because it's can be very individualized.
Hmm.
But if you don't want to track any of that, I'll just stick to like 6 to 8 hours. Don't really go close to that from your sleep, and then you should be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. In general, I'd agree. For me, that wouldn't work. That would be too much coffee for me. But yeah,
Yeah,
like you said,
yeah,
try and get your genetics tested to see how much caffeine you can handle.
definitely. I
And
think
of
it's
course, it's trial and error.
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. It definitely is.
All right.
I think it's a good note to end on.